quick video response to Mannix the Pirate's video on the problem with high taxes and welfare. Some of this has already been covered in the Chad's video response, so I'll just signal that, but I won't go into it. The point that the Chad makes, which is quite right, is that a lot of taxation, of course, doesn't go to welfare. It goes to infrastructure for the societies in which we relatively live. You're the United States society, or in my case, the United Kingdom society. And by that I mean things like, of course, the military, but also everything else that a meaningful society needs to run itself. Education, the whole system really, policing, you name it. In relation to that, the amount of those shared resources that people use is not the same. People who have high incomes make far greater use of shared resources than people on low incomes. They have more cars, which make more use of the road system. They take more holidays. They travel more. They make far greater use of shared resources, and that far greater use of shared resources should be reflected. Not all shared resources, but some shared resources, and that difference is quite substantial. The second thing is to do with why some people are more successful and richer than other people in the first place, and it is, if it was a level playing field, if the economy that we're all, the kind of liquid economy that we're all swimming in, was a perfectly still pond. And by the way, I'm borrowing this metaphor of the liquid economy from the modern mystic, who uses it quite a bit in his videos. An excellent set of videos on economics. This economy, this pool of economic resources that we're all kind of flapping around in, if it was perfectly still and we all had equal opportunity to swim where we wanted, of course it would be fine, but it's not like that. That liquidity is in motion. There are currents and it flows, and it's the responsibility of good government to make sure that flow keeps moving, because keeping the economy moving is necessary, so it has to flow like that. But what that means is that some people are swept along in that flow and benefit from the currents of that flow, and are perhaps better able to maneuver themselves into the fast-flowing currents of the economy than others. So those people like George Soros and Warren Buffett and Donald Trump, I think you mentioned, Mannix, with comparatively little effort, skill undoubtedly, and it's not to be condemned, but with comparatively little effort, can do that little sideways movement, 3 foot to the left, pick up on the currents, and find themselves swept down the economic stream with all the financial rewards that comes with that. So of course, while they should be rewarded for that small step to the left, they shouldn't really be rewarded for the advantages they're given by the economic currents which have taken them into that fantastic elevated position downstream. And in a sense, the way that taxation, for me at least, the way that taxation feeds into that is that taxation is our way of recognizing that it's not a still pool in which everyone is equally buoyant. There are these differences, and taxation takes those differences into account and makes those adjustments. And of course, just like there are these currents which flow through, and which good governance tries to control, just like there are those fast-flowing currents, there are also doldrums and whirlpools and places where people can get caught. And if you yourself have been in a situation like that, Mannix, and you talk about being in shelters and spending some time in those environments, you'll know that if people aren't very careful, or people aren't very lucky, more likely, once you're in that, in the doldrums of being part of the underclass or being economically disadvantaged, it's more and more difficult to move those few feet to the left to get yourself into the fast-flowing current again, and you need all the help you can get to do that. And it's not through idleness, it's not through neglect, it's not through, not usually, or certainly not solely through those things. It's largely through the play of the system, not through the play of individuals within it. And welfare is an absolutely necessary part of the natural checking and balancing of a system which produces those inequities. Necessarily, perhaps, maybe there's no alternative to producing inequities, I don't know, I'd like to hope there are, but given that inequities are produced by the dynamics of the system, there should be checks and balances in place to pull people out of the doldrums, or at least make sure they don't drown, and to make sure people aren't advantaged disproportionately by having to have their canoe in the right part of the rapids. Okay, just one last thing really, which is to do with the perception that you have there, which is a commonly held perception, which is to do with the economic underclass and people living on welfare and people deserving to live on welfare, and people need to be incentivized in order to be able to get themselves out of that, and the only incentive is to slap people down or let them drown. You, Mannix, did spend time in a housing shelter, which is great. It's not fantastic, but at least there was a housing shelter there. Presumably if there had been no welfare system at all, you would be fairly seriously fucked, and you would not be in the position you are now. So at least, so having even a minimal safety net is something that you benefited from, thank God, and I'm glad you're out of that now. It's not good to have those kind of systems in place where people can drown or flounder for long periods of time. It's not good for the individual, and it's terribly destructive for the society at large. But also that perception that we are individually responsible, totally individually responsible for our own fate, and that there is no currents in society, that if someone's floundering it's their own fault, and if someone succeeds then it's their own efforts. Yeah, it's a myth, and to be honest, it's a myth which really you would have to ask whose interests are being served by that. And it's not yours, Mannix. If you're in the military, then your salary is between 13 and 6% lower than an equivalent job outside of the military. I mean, that's just the case. I mean, look at the statistic, look at the facts on that. You are slightly economically disadvantaged because you're an employee of the government and you are paid for by people's taxes. And yet you have been sold a line, and apparently you believed the line, that the economic disadvantage is your fault, and that there's things you can do to get out of that, and it's not. It really isn't. It's what used to be called false consciousness in the old Marxist terms. That those of us who are earning less than the average wage it's somehow our fault. You know what I mean? And we're not trying hard enough. And those who are fantastically wealthy are just kind of more superior human beings. And it's not the case. It's the functioning of a social system. And of course there should be a meritocracy for those people who, as I said earlier, can take that sideways step to the left and get themselves into a current and steer the economy and help to create an economy which doesn't create so many doldrums and so many whirlpools. But the idea that you either sink or swim is not good for anyone, I would suggest. Yeah, progressive tax. I would personally, I would do super tax like we used to have in Britain in the 1960s and 70s. 90% tax for the fabulously wealthy without a second's hesitation. Believe you me, it'll never affect you, it'll never affect me, it'll only affect other people. It'll only affect the fabulously wealthy. If you're being sold a line that a flat tax will benefit you, believe me, it won't. Progressive taxation, properly applied, should be much more punishing to the fabulously wealthy than it is already. I mean, just work it out, do the maths. If you're earning less than the average wage, which you are, Mannix, believe me, and so am I, then a good progressive tax will benefit you personally. It will benefit people like you, people like military personnel, or in my case, people like teachers, people like nurses, people like street cleaners, people who do the real work, to be honest. People who do the blue-collar jobs in the factories. These are the people who will benefit most from progressive taxation. The people who will benefit least from progressive taxation are the people who, quite frankly, do the least, but have been the luckiest. Anyway, thanks very much for that stimulating video, Mannix, and do check out the Modern Mystic. His stuff is really great. Thank you.